Welcome to the Ditch the Struggle podcast. I'm your host, Alana Rosso. I'm a graphic designer turned career and success coach who knew I could do better, but kept falling short of where I wanted to go. But after years of exploring personal and career development, business, money mindset, and energy work, I'm here to tell you that yes, you can move from stuck and defeated to empowered and confident. Ready to dive in? Awesome. Together, let's ditch the struggle. Hi, everyone. We have a conversation today that is unlike anything I've done on this show before. Kathryn's stories are completely captivating. Her wisdom just is beyond words. I loved doing this episode because I loved listening. And actually, for most of this episode, I'm not saying a lot. I am just literally absorbing her stories and everything she has to say. I won't give too much away, but I'm going to share a little bit of her bio and then we'll dive right in. So in December of 2020, Kathryn Severns Avery's husband, Chris, was killed by robbery suspects fleeing from police. Before this tragedy, Kathryn knew nothing about the world of first responders other than a few interactions for well-deserved speeding tickets. But the kindness and compassion she experienced after Chris's death from officers of the Lakewood, Colorado Police Department, and what she learned by creating an ongoing relationship with those who serve, protect, and care for us in our worst moments, inspired her to act. And act she did. Kathryn went on in 2021 to found Restoration Ranch, Colorado. And we're going to talk a lot about that ranch and that special place and what she's done. I hope you guys love this episode. Welcome, Kathryn. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while now, and today's the day.
It is. I am so excited to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to come and tell my story.
You have quite a story, so I just want to dive right in. Let's get the audience knowing you. What is your story?
So on December 4th of 2020, everybody remembers back then we were in the middle of COVID, and here in the United States, we were about to go back into another lockdown. My husband, Chris, and I were getting ready for the holidays. My 96-year-old at the time father had been living with us, and we had just recently moved him into a house that was only 3 doors down from ours, so that he had his own kind of private memory care facility during COVID. And Chris and I were getting our lives back after him coming to live with us 3.5 years before that, after my stepmom died. So that morning, I had gotten up super early, like 4:30 in the morning, to work on my holiday lighting display. I had won my neighborhood competition 2 years in a row, and Chris was like, go for a hat trick. So I'm out there. It's freezing cold. I'm working on an 8-foot angel that I am carving out of styrofoam insulation and making it by hand, because of course that's what I do. So I came in, I'm freezing cold. Chris comes down, and we had this lovely call and response that we always did. He would say, how's my baby? And I'd say, I'm fine, my angel, my love, my darling. Chris was my first husband. I was his third wife. And he said, I had 2 starter wives, and then I found the right one. And so I had waited to get married in life till very late by most people's standards. I was 49 when I got married for the first time. And because I wanted a career and I wanted to go do all the things that I wanted to do. But that morning, we were getting ready, like I said, for this lockdown. So we were like, okay, we need to go get groceries. And I had decided that I was going to do a very gluttonous Advent activity and make 25 different kinds of cookies. Chris and I both love fruitcake, and I had found a recipe for fruitcake cookies, but the grocery store closest to us was out of citron, which is an essential ingredient. So I shifted the order to a different grocery store. So that morning, as I come in and we're having coffee and we're making the list, I'm highly intuitive, and that's a huge part of my story. The voice in my head goes off and says, you need to apologize to Chris, because we'd had an argument a couple of weeks before, and we rarely argued. But in this one, he had reached out to a childhood friend, which I didn't care about, but they had been romantically involved. And I said, yeah, I don't care if she calls you, but I'm not real keen on you calling her. And he's like, okay, I won't do that. And I had come home from running errands 2 weeks earlier, and he's on the phone in the kitchen and it's on speakerphone. And I hear her voice and I tell him, wrap it up. I need to talk to you. And so he says, well, I got to go. Kath's home. And I hear her say, it was nice talking with you, Chris. Thanks for calling. And the fire that came out of my eyes. And I looked at him and I said, Christopher Avery, in 13 years of marriage, you have never betrayed my trust until this moment. And I am so mad I could spit. And he's like, well, how is this different than you talking to one of your male friends? And I said, well, the one that you're referring to is 20 years younger than I am. He's gay and I never slept with him. And so it was just like, and it was like, okay. And he just kind of like limped out of the kitchen because he knew like this was going nowhere. So that voice goes off and it says, you need to apologize to Chris. And I start arguing with it. No, I don't. It's like, yes, you do. No, I don't. So finally I said, I owe you an apology, Chris. And he's like, for what? And I said, look, if you want to talk to your friend, and he knew I was talking about, I'm not going to name her name, but if you want to talk to her, do. She shares part of your life that no one else shares. And I said, I get it. And he's like, really? And I said, yeah. And he was sitting at our island and he got up and he walked over to me and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, Kathryn, I love only you. And I'm like, whoa. So we go about our morning, we get all our stuff done. I'm actually in the midst of making a different kind of cookie. Chris gets the list compiled. He's getting ready to walk out the door, and that voice goes off in my head again. And it says, make sure you kiss him goodbye. So I went up to him and I kissed him on the back of the neck. And I said, do you know how much I love you? And he said, yeah, I do. And other than, I'll be back soon, those were our last words to each other. At the same time, Chris was driving to the grocery store. 3 people were robbing an Ulta beauty supply store in the vicinity of where this grocery store was. But because they had robbed it previously and were instantly recognized when they walked into the store, and this time exhibited menacing behavior, acting as if they had weapons, it was called in as an armed robbery. These weren't the brightest people because the store that they were robbing is 50 yards from the Lakewood, Colorado Police Department headquarters. So there was a massive police response, which resulted in a high-speed chase. When the robbery suspects were going the wrong way through traffic, the PD called off the chase. They continued to go through a residential neighborhood, turning onto a side street, going between 70 and 75 miles an hour. Chris was stopped at an intersection. The light was red. The light turned green, and his car was T-boned and pushed 35 feet sideways down the street. The front axle was broken. The driver's side door was at the midline of the car. Chris had multiple blunt force trauma injuries, all of which contribute to his death on scene. So I'm back in the garage working on my Angel after he's left, and I hear sirens, and I hear a helicopter, and I'm like, wow, I wonder what's going on. What was weird was that at 3 minutes after 2 o'clock, my whole body shook. And I went, something just happened to Chris. And it was shortly, maybe 10 minutes after that, that I heard the sirens and the helicopter and everything else. And I thought, no, he's okay. And then it got to be an hour, and the errand should have only taken 15, 20 minutes tops. And I started to get angry at him. And that inner voice went, don't be mad at him. So I'm calling him and I'm texting him, and it's rolling right to voicemail. No response. And it gets to be later, and I'm like, okay, something's not right. So after an hour and a half, I called the non-emergency number of dispatch, and they connected me with a gentleman at the police department And I told him, hey, my husband went out. He should have been home almost 2 hours ago by that time. And he's not home. And he's like, okay, give me your information. And he's asking for a description of the car. And I can't remember my license plate number. I mean, you're just like, you're in your right mind. And so he's like, I promise I'll keep you posted. 3 hours go by. I call one of my friends who's also highly intuitive. And I'm like, Rochelle, something's really wrong. And she's like, what do you think happened? I said, I'm pretty sure Chris is dead. And I said, what are you getting? And she just burst into tears. And she's like, I'm getting the same thing. By 4:30, it's starting to get dark. And I thought, well, my husband was a big man. And I thought maybe I should just go to the grocery store and see, like, did he have a medical event, So I drove to the grocery store, but by the grace of God, I took a different route and I did not go past the crash scene. So I get there, I go up and down the aisles in the parking lot. I don't see his car. I go over to the delivery pickup area, ask if he's gotten the groceries. And they're like, no, he never came. Do you want them? So I got the groceries, and then I called back the gentleman at the police department who had given me a different number to call him directly. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure my husband's dead because he never got the groceries. And he's like, Kathryn, I promise we'll keep you posted. So I went home and I called a very dear friend and said, something's wrong. I think Chris has passed away. And I explained what was going on. And she's like, do you want me to come over? And I said, yeah. And by this time, it's like probably close to 6:30. Your sense of time gets really skewed in a situation like this. But I remember, and I said, yes, please do come over. And I remember I was trying to find Chris's iPhone using Find Your iPhone, and it's not activated. So I'm frustrated. And I'm sitting in our office at the front of our home, and I see 4 people on my front porch. And I'm like, it's awfully late for solicitors to be coming and doing door knocking. And then there's the proverbial knock on the door, and I open it up and I see 2 police officers and 2 other women. And they said, may we come in? And I said, of course. And I let them in, and that voice in my head went off again and said, you better be sitting down. So I went over and sat where Chris had been sitting that morning. And I just looked at him and I said, is my husband dead? And they said, yes, we're so sorry. It was a traffic accident. And after they walked in, my friend walked in, and she's a therapist, and she saw the look on my face and she instantly knew what had happened. So she just starts getting business cards from everybody and taking notes. Because literally, Alana, it's just like in the movies. You're hearing words, but it's wow, wow. I mean, it was like nothing was making sense, and time was warping. It was going super fast and then slowing down. And I was like, I was in shock. One of the officers got a phone call and left the room and went into our office and closed the door. And I thought, well, that's weird. And he was on the phone for about 20 minutes. And he came out and he said, I'm now at liberty to tell you what happened. And he explained about the robbery and the chase, but it had been called off. And I was just like, oh my gosh. Well, again, I was so protected that day because had I turned on the news that night, I would have watched my husband die on the 5 o'clock news because they had gotten the surveillance footage from the convenience store at that intersection and were running it. And it was clearly visible who my husband was in that footage.
Oh my gosh.
And so I didn't see that. And I just remember them leaving. And I was in the kitchen and people started arriving. I guess the word was getting out. And my dad's caretakers came over because, of course, my father's freaking out because he's aware of what's going on. And I just remember standing next to my kitchen sink. And I don't remember doing this, but I do remember ending up on the floor. I just literally slid down the cabinet. So things changed after that. And Chris would have celebrated a milestone birthday later that year, but I'm going to backtrack just a minute. So this was December 4th of 2020. And I was contacted by the local media for pictures and a statement. Well, something similar to this had happened in my family when I was in my 20s. My mother had been involved in a single car accident. And after Karen Ann Quinlan, she is the second test case in the United States to have someone take it off of life support. So when that happened, I was a kid. And I had just graduated with a degree in journalism with a specialization in public relations, and we are being hounded for statements, literally phone calls every 5 minutes. And finally, we just took it off the hook. And what I learned from that experience was if I didn't take control of the story, a very different story than the one I wanted to be out there would be told.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the news outlets just pulled stuff off my social media feeds and from my business website and all that kind of stuff, and were running pictures without my permission. But the local CBS station asked me for photos. And I said, I tell you what, I will give you photos that no one else has, but I'm going to send you a letter and I want you to read that letter. And when I know you've read it, I'll send the pictures. And their news director called me back and said, Kathryn, would you be willing to read your letter as the basis of our coverage? And in that letter, I thanked the Lakewood Police Department. I talked about how hard the job of the notification team and how they had done it with such compassion and excellence. I couldn't have asked for better people to deliver life-altering and devastating news. And I asked the community to do acts of service in memory of my husband. And I got notes from more than 500 people telling me what they had done in memory of Chris. So that set a very different tone and tenor for this interaction. And quite frankly, the Lakewood Police Department fully expected me to sue. And I had so many people say, are you going to sue the police department? And I'm like, why would I do that? Well, there was a high-speed chase. Yes, and they called it off. And they were like, but you could get a lot of money. And I'm like, that is not going to bring my dead husband back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why would I do that? So knowing that I had 3 defendants, 3 legal proceedings that I was going to be involved in, and Chris's birthday was coming up in April, I said, I don't want to be alone on your birthday. And I asked if I could bring food from Chris's favorite restaurants to roll calls and just be with the police department and the people who were with my husband when he died to celebrate his birthday. And they were like, yeah, sure. So the day before I call, I'm like, okay, what time do I show up and when? And they're like, oh, you're really going to do this? I was like, yeah. So I didn't know that a lot of people, when they talk to the police, just blow hot air. And it's like they say that they're going to do things and they never do. So I showed up at roll call with breakfast burritos from a local restaurant. And unbeknownst to me, the day before, a 14-year-old boy had stabbed his mother more than 30 times. And at Lakewood, they call them agents. Everybody else would call them an officer. But the agent first on scene was relating in graphic and uncensored language what had happened. And I'm sitting there going, why is he at work? And when I finally had a chance to ask command staff, I was told he doesn't want to be at home by himself ruminating on this. He may not want or need mental health counseling at this time, and there's no other place for him to go. And I thought that is so fundamentally wrong on so many different layers. I don't even know what to do. So that happened in April. My dad passed away in March. So I lost my husband and then my father.
Wow.
I am the only surviving member of my immediate family. Both of my siblings are gone. And I was thinking about, okay, what am I going to do? I have these legal proceedings. I can't get to my vacation home in Maine. Let me call and ask if I can donate time there to this police department. So I called HR and said, told them what I wanted to do. And the woman's response was, I have no idea. Nobody's ever asked me that question before. So I got a call back the next day and she said, well, it can't be a direct donation because that's a bribe and we'll put you in jail. And I'm like, well, let's not do that. So she said, let me introduce you to our Fraternal Order of Police rep and maybe he can figure out a way to do this. So we meet at a Starbucks. Later, I find out when I've become friends with this man, he almost blew off the meeting, but his wife said, she deserves your time. Go meet her. So I told him what I wanted to do. And the first thing out of his mouth is, what do you want? I was like, excuse me?
Mm.
And he's like, what do you want? And I'm like, I don't want anything. He's like, you have to want something. And my brain is just spinning.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I want to say thank you. And he looked at me like I had 5 heads. And so we talked about how this would work. And I said, and I have another idea. He's like, what's that? And I said, I want to buy a ranch and create a place for first responders to be able to go to just take care of themselves, not a mental health facility, but a place for them to go and relax and do whatever self-care they need. And he's like, that doesn't exist. I said, yeah, I know. I want to create it. And I told him that my father had passed and that I had inherited some money and that I was planning to use that money to do this. And he was just like, who are you? So, long story short, I did find a 40-acre ranch. I bought it. I founded the 501c3 in 2021, purchased the ranch in 2022, started renovation on March 5th when I had bought it March 4th. We were open by August the 3rd with our first guests. And it has grown and grown and grown. And it made me very much aware of what's going on in the first responder community because the first year, nobody was coming. And I was like, I don't get it. I've literally spent $1 million of this inheritance, which was almost all of it, to be able to start this foundation and to buy the ranch. And what I learned was that first responder agencies are so short-staffed that it's not that they didn't want to come. Nobody could take the time off to come.
Right.
And then what I learned was that they're highly suspicious and skeptical people. And it was like, what do we have to do? What oath do we have to sign? What timeshare pitch do we have to listen to? What political party do we have to, what religious? And I'm like, no, we don't do any of that. And they were like, no. So the first year we had about 75 visitors. Our second year we had just over 250. Last year we had more than 500. This year we're on track for more than 1,000 visitors to come to the ranch.
That's absolutely incredible. And how your story goes from such tragedy to something that is really so beautiful that you're creating is, to me, just so inspiring.
Thank you. It was a conscious choice. And one of the things that I said in this news clip was, I choose to not have this ruin my life. And it hasn't.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone had told me almost 4.5 years ago now, it'll be 5 years in December, that my life would be this rich, this purposeful, this fulfilling and rewarding, I would have said, you're crazy. And going through the legal system, it is not a justice system, which I have learned. Going through those proceedings, all 3 of the defendants took plea bargains. The driver got 8 years. The person I refer to as the ringleader got 6 years because he knew how to play the speedy trial clock and get concurrent rather than consecutive sentencing. And the woman who didn't know how to do that got 11 years. 2 of the 3 defendants are already in their second year of community correction and parole hearings, which means that I choose to go to every hearing to ensure that they stay in jail.
Mm-hmm.
And I have become a fierce advocate of educating victims what they need to do to keep people in jail. I'm 5 for 5 in terms of hearings. So most people, the victims advocates can't tell you what to say in your victim impact statement. So most people get up there and do what they suggest, that you tell how this has affected your life. When I went to my very first hearing, I was second to appear, and I watched the first family impacted, get up there and make their statement, and I watched everyone in the room glaze over and shut down because it was a traumatic experience for them to listen to this family. And I thought, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to talk about what happened in the courtroom that was outrageous, what happened in hearings that was outrageous, things, the falsehoods and inaccuracies that were perpetrated in these hearings. For example, there was a parole hearing about 2.5 months ago for the person, again, I call the ringleader of the group. He told the parole officer when he was asked, so what happened after your car struck Mr. Avery's car? He literally said this: we were only going 17 miles an hour and he had a heart attack. I almost went through the phone.
Yeah.
And I said, because they get to speak and then they're off and I get to speak. And I said, let me start with that. They were going between 70 and 75 miles an hour. My husband had at least 4 blunt force trauma injuries, any one of which would have been fatal. So to infer that my husband was somehow at fault and had a heart attack causing his own death is absolutely ludicrous and reprehensible. And that is why this man should stay in jail.
Mm.
No one teaches you to say
Right.
that.
You were bringing the evidence and you were bringing a lot of logic to the room, which I think a lot of people let their emotions take over, which makes sense, obviously.
Right.
But interesting that you saw how someone else was doing it and you were like, I'm going to do the 180 of that. Different perspective.
Yes. Again, a conscious choice,
Right.
because I recognized if I do what they did, there is a chance this man will get out on parole or get out to community corrections. Yeah, it's quite an educational experience.
That's a whole other layer that I didn't know that you were doing. So that's also very fascinating. Now, have you always been someone that could consciously make choices and easily, or could recognize that, okay, I do have a choice in this situation? Or is that something that you've had to grow into?
All of the above.
Okay.
So I love how my husband would describe me to other people. He would say, Kathryn is someone who jumps off the mountain and learns how to fly on the way down.
Okay.
But I was not that way as a child. I was very stymied and very didn't want to be noticed, didn't want to do anything that would draw attention to myself, and yet craved that. I always wanted a larger life than I had, but that wasn't particularly approved of in my family. I was always told, you want way too much. You always are going for things that are just out of what you can do, which was what drove me to do things like when I was in my 20s, I decided I'm just going to move to New York City because I want to be a director and I'm going to go and apply to the Directors Guild of America's apprenticeship program. And so I go to Carnegie Hall and I'm one of 1,500 people in that room. And I'm like, I don't care how good I am. This is not happening. So I was like, okay, what else can I do? How can I turn this around? So I took a job as a temp. And in that temp job, I was working for a public relations firm that did work with the Industrial Development Board for Northern Ireland. Well, this is in the middle of the 1980s, and Northern Ireland is just like blowing
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, literally.
Yes, literally. And
Yeah.
so I'm replacing their receptionist who is out sick. And they're doing what's called an inward investment mission, where they're trying to match industrialists from Northern Ireland with industrialists in the United States to try to bring down the 52% unemployment rate that
Mhm.
made recruiting people into the IRA very easy. So I'm sitting at the desk, and there's like this stack of press releases that are sitting there. And me being me, I pick them up and I start editing them. And I take them into the president of the agency. And I said, I don't know what you think, but I think these read a lot better now. And I put them down on his desk and fully expected to be fired as a result of that. And about 10 minutes went by, and he literally came out with a stack and just said, get busy. So I got hired. The receptionist never forgave me because she had been working there for 3 years waiting for that same kind of opportunity. The man who was head of the public relations department did not care for me because I was out there, I was doing stuff. And I became very good friends with the client. And I remember being interviewed because at that time I was still like an intern, a paid intern. And the gentleman who was head of the PR department, when I gave him my resume, was very unceremonious. And he read my resume and he called me in. He literally did this. He took it and he held it over the trash can. And he said, you change jobs the way most people change underwear. And then he dropped it in the trash. And I thought, okay, this is not going to work. So I had a conversation with the client later that day. And I said, I'm probably not going to be here tomorrow. And he's like, well, what happened? And I explained what had just happened. Well, I came in the next morning and the head of PR's office was empty. And the president of the agency came to me and said, you're now the interim head of PR. I was 26 years old.
Wow.
But it's like the door opens, walk through it, make the decision,
Yes.
trust that you can learn what you need to know. You only have to be one step ahead.
Yes, that is absolutely true. I'm a big believer in that. You only have to be one step ahead of the people who are trying to learn from you or what you're doing, or you just have to have a little bit more knowledge and you can springboard into wherever you want to go. And I tell myself that all the time when I feel like I'm totally out of my comfort zone. It's like, well, I just need to know a little bit more
Yeah.
and I can keep going. And I mean, it sounds like you're a bit of a risk taker. I mean, you did some bold moves there.
Yes. And I think that risk taking is an acquired skill, but it comes from an innate sense of trust in yourself.
Yeah.
And trust in yourself comes from keeping promises to yourself. And that's where most people fall down.
1,000%. I'm a huge advocate of consistency and doing small things consistently to prove to yourself that you will pull through for yourself, that you can trust yourself, so that you do not have the self-doubt that you will keep going, because that's where you have to dig deep. No one else can really do that for you.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And this is one thing where, and I remember I was working in Dallas again. When I graduated from college, I had a degree in journalism with a specialization in public relations, but I really wanted to work in radio and television. And my father was like, I'm not paying for a useless degree. Okay, Dad. So, PR at least was comprehensible to him. I took a speech class and had my professor say, you are a natural speaker. And my response was, how on earth do you make a living doing that? And this was just when public speaking with people like Zig Ziglar and, all the greats were just getting started. So I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. But I called a friend who was working in a cable television station. And I said, there's an ad for a copywriter job at KLIF and KPLX. And I said, I want to go after it, but I don't know how to write a radio commercial. Can you teach me? So he came over and showed me the format. And I said, okay, come back in 2 hours. And he's like, why? I said, I'll have 40 commercials for you to just go ahead and he's like, seriously? I'm like, seriously. So he came back and I had this whole, stack of things because I knew I was going to need to have samples to show people that I knew what I was doing. So I applied for the job. I go in. I'm one of 4 people who gets a second interview. The guy who's head of production makes the decision. And again, this is where having this developed sense of intuition, and I want to talk about that after this because it's super.
Me too. Me too.
But I'm sitting there and he gives us the premise for the commercial and says, okay, write it. And I hear, as your background music in my head, I'm hearing, choose Frank Zappa's What's the Ugliest Part of Your Body? And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And it's just like, choose that as the background music. So I'm like, okay. And then I write the commercial and I'm the first one done and I hand it in. And he looks at it, he reads it, and he says, the other ones, you can stop writing. She's got the job. And I was like, what? And so I said, why me? And he goes, I'm a Frank Zappa fan. And anybody who knows that song knows what they're doing. I was like,
were you a Frank Zappa fan? Like, did you know?
no.
So this
I
was
had
a
only
full-on
heard
download of information that was meant to help you get this job.
I remember my brother telling me about this song called What's the Ugliest Part of Your Body? Some say your nose, some say your toes. I think it's your mind. That was all I knew about that song. That's the full extent of it. And yet that was what I was told to use, and I got the job.
So clearly your intuition has been guiding you through job interviews. I love that you told a great job interview story because I love to dive into those. And so many times we're in that position of like, I'm not going to get this job, or it feels impossible, and something miraculous or magical happens. So that can happen. I think that's so important to remember. And then it's just that there's these moments where we just have to listen to what's going on in that intuitive space.
Correct. And I don't have a conscious recollection of having this finely tuned a sense of intuition until I was in my 20s. And as I mentioned, my mom was in a single car accident. Well, again, and this is weird. Chris died on December 4th. My mom's accident was on December 6th, 1979. So like very close time periods, but lots of years apart. And I had just graduated from college. I had my first job. I didn't like it very much. And I remember my mom calling to give me information on my flight from Dallas, where I was living, back to the East Coast where my family was. And I had a full-on pity party, Alana. I mean, I was just like, play that violin. And I remember my mom saying, wow, I didn't realize that all these things were bothering you. And I said, well, they are. And she's like, okay, well, I'll see you soon. And I hung up with her. And that is the first time I consciously remember the voice, I'll call it a voice, whatever it is, went off in my head and it said, call her back. And I was like, I just talked to her. Call her back. I just talked to her. And I'm having this argument and it's getting louder and more insistent till it's screaming in my head, call her back. So I pick up the phone and I call her back. And I said, Mom, I forgot to tell you 2 things, how much I love you and how much I'm looking forward to coming home. Her accident was the next morning. Those were my last words to her.
Like, you get chills when you hear that, It's like you knew something and you knew.
Just like with Chris.
Yeah.
I knew I needed to kiss him goodbye and to tell him, do you know how much I love you? And for him to acknowledge that. Because I've had 2 moments in my lifetime of perfect closure. There's nothing left unsaid. There's no remorse. It's like I was complete with my husband when he was killed. I knew he loved me. He knew I loved him. Same thing with my mom. And how often we dismiss that voice almost like it's an annoyance. And it is part of our reptilian brain designed to keep us alive. And everyone has that intuition. It's just inherently built into our nervous system. But developing it and cultivating it is a process. And I just either intuitively knew how to do that or observed other people doing it and just assimilated it. So now, I mean, literally, if I hear that voice going off and saying, take off your clothes and do naked backflips down the street, I would do it
I think
because
you
I
would.
know there's a reason. I know there's a
Yeah.
reason. Yeah.
Yes. What have you done to cultivate and nurture your intuition?
Meditation. And quite frankly, a lot of future self work. And I heard one, I'm a podcast junkie. I just am. And I heard a podcast again, Ed Milet, and he was he had a guest named John Gordon on. And I remember I was in the car and John Gordon said something and I almost drove off the road. And he said, quantum field and the Holy Spirit are two names for the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I went, what? And I was like, yeah, that's exactly right. And so when you understand that through whatever that spiritual realm is, irrespective of what your religious beliefs are, it exists. Every religion acknowledges it. And when you connect into that, you have access to infinite intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And as you cultivate that and learn how to ask for it, because you have to ask for it, it doesn't just show up, and then listen and practice that, it starts off with little nudges. And then, like, if those little nudges don't work, it gets a little stronger. And then we've all had the cosmic 2x4 that's like, excuse me,
Yes.
I need your attention.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, I'll pay attention now. It's like, yeah. But it is a practice. It is a discipline. And it's also a choice. It's a choice to say, I have at my disposal everything that I need for a happy, healthy, wonderful life,
Mm-hmm.
irrespective of what my life circumstances are in the moment.
Yes. Going back to the idea of choice.
Yep. Yeah.
And then it is so easy to ignore the intuition because we are so distracted. We're so busy, all of these things. But I know for me, I've had a lot of pity parties in my life. I really liked pity parties, actually. I was really into them.
Well, they're so supported by our culture.
They
Yeah.
are, and they're very addictive. Nowadays, my general rule is I can give myself a 24-hour one, and then I pull myself out. So that's my thing. I was like, okay, I'm just going to feel like crap for a bit, and I know I'm doing this, but then it's time to pull myself out. But then it's like getting back to the inner voice, connecting to that piece of you that I think innately believe that amazing things can happen, but we choose to tune that out, in part because we are so inundated with stuff that is not beautiful, that is upsetting. But we can connect back to that space that I feel that you have this amazing ability to do, of seeing, I don't want to say positive, that just feels like trite. It doesn't feel like it's enough, but seeing the beauty, the magic, the possibility, like the way that you have been able to take this experience and build, the Restoration Ranch, Colorado from this, and help so many other people, that I think those first responders, I consider those people like earth angels, that
they are.
Like the nurses as well, some teachers, like those people that come to this earth.
Yeah.
And they are just here to do that kind of work.
And we define first responders very differently than most nonprofits. We include everyone in what I call the traumatic event life cycle. So it's dispatch, fire and EMS, law enforcement, including corrections and park rangers, because people forget that park rangers are law enforcement, firefighters, and search and rescue all rolled into one. Frontline medical personnel, victim advocates, coroner's office officials, and members of the judiciary.
Mm-hmm.
And their families. I had a judge come up to me and say, "You are the first person in my 30 years on the bench who recognizes I am traumatized by the testimony I listen to
Yes.
in my courtroom."
Huge, huge. I had a friend, one of my friends is married to a judge who's now retired, and I just would hear snippets, and I was like, how are you functioning? How?
Right, right. And when we have people who are overtired, overworked, in a constant state of fight or flight, how do we expect them to make rational decisions?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I learned, and again, these are all things that I have a lot of different soapboxes that I stand up on. But when you go through an experience like I did, where my husband was killed, and in the first year of his death, the number of decisions that I have to make that will affect me for the rest of my life in terms of finances and everything
Mm-hmm.
else. And I'm doing it well. If you were to take me out of this role, but call me something else, you would say I was mentally impaired because of trauma. And yet I have to make all of those decisions and live by them.
Yeah.
And it's like we don't do grief in our society. We
No.
don't really understand victims. And I mean, it may be different in Canada than it is in the United States, but I literally am responsible for keeping my husband's killers in jail. If I don't show up at the hearings and I don't do what I do to refute their assertions as to what happened, I actually have had people tell me, "I'm so glad you were here because, quite frankly, I didn't have time to go through all the case notes."
Mm.
And if they had taken the testimony of the
Mhm.
perpetrator rather than me, they would have walked.
Mhm.
And it's relentless. So, like on the day of the hearing, um, I have I get a notice that okay, there's going to be a hearing. I have to call them to find out when the hearing is. They don't call me, I have to call them. Then I am told it will be sometime between 8 in the morning and often as late as 3 in the afternoon, but I won't know until the day of the hearing when it's taking place. So think about if you've got a family, if you've got a job and you want to appear in person. I've been in 5 different locales all over the state of Colorado to go to these hearings. And you get to the point where you ask yourself, is it worth it?
Yeah.
And a lot of people give up. Well, I was appointed to the Victims Advocacy Law Enforcement Board as their victim representative. And again, I you can tell I have no problem speaking my mind. But and with my media experience and background, I used it because last year, December 4th of 2024, the Colorado Department of Corrections scheduled a parole hearing for the driver who killed Chris on the anniversary of the day he killed
Mm.
him. I petitioned to have that date moved. They refused. So rather than spending a day honoring my husband's memory, I'm being dragged through a parole hearing. And I'm like, no one should ever have to go through this. However, if you believe and have a belief system like I do, I believe in destiny. I believe I was chosen for this mission. You couldn't get a better person to go after this than me because everything that has happened to me in my lifetime has led me to this point, and I am perfectly equipped to do what it is I am called to do.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are too scared to find out what their destiny is. I can't have it. It's too big. It's too this. It's too and I'm like, I don't want to get to the end of my life and in my belief system, stand before God and explain what I did with my life and have God say to me, you could have done so much more if you just stepped into your greatness. That would be the ultimate shame to me.
What you just said there, people are too scared to step into their destiny. I love the way you've said that, because as a career coach, I hear from people all the time that they kind of want to know their purpose. They want to know what they're called to do. They want to figure out what that thing is. Sometimes I get the sense they don't actually want to know because it's so big, or it feels too big. They're like, if I keep it small, it's easier. And I feel like I did this for a long time too. Stay small, stay stuck, because then I don't have to actually face what my potential could be.
Correct.
Because it's then you have to do the work. Then you have to put yourself out there, which is always going to involve putting yourself out there. Even if you're just sitting at home writing a book, at some point it's got to go into the world or whatever it is.
Right.
You've got to show up.
If you don't do it, that's work too. It's just negative work rather than positive work.
It's exhausting.
Because we both know staying stuck is soul sucking.
Mm-hmm.
When you know that you're capable of more and you don't do it, that sense of regret gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So what I'm working on now, in my personal work and the work that I do in general in other aspects of my life, is how are you going to feel if you don't do it? And learning to lean into the discomfort.
Yeah.
I'm listening to a book right now called Discipline is Destiny.
Mm.
And it's by Ryan Holiday. I think that's his name. Anyway, it is Discipline is Destiny. And he says, intentionally do things that make you uncomfortable, because life is inevitably uncomfortable.
1,000%. I always say sit in the cringe. You just got to sit in the cringe. Like, you got to be so uncomfortable. If I'm not uncomfortable almost every day, then it never feels like a good day if I haven't actually pushed myself to do something uncomfortable or different or challenging. And having a conversation with different people all the time. This is, a part of my challenge. This is trying to figure things out and see how I can step up. And there's just so many ways to do it. But yeah, that is the discipline piece. It comes down to also wanting to figure it out, or giving yourself permission to want something. Never mind the going for it. But that's, again, why I think people like to stay cloudy. I have one person I know, and when I ask them anything about their career decisions, I don't know. The answer is always, I don't know, which keeps the person stuck, which is where they actually subconsciously want to be. Because if you don't know, you get to stay stuck and you don't have to actually do anything. You don't have to put yourself out there. So it's actually very advantageous to stay stuck.
And when I have people that say the same thing, and I ask them, if you don't know, who does? Yeah. And then they're like, oh. Yeah. But I also think that we live in, just depending on the sphere that you're in, either your family or your work situation, that I love the analogy of crabs in a pot. That are being cooked.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the one that's trying to get up and out is literally pulled in.
Yeah.
We are also hardwired for community and connection, because when we were evolving millennia ago, if you were shunned by your community, you would literally die. You would starve to death. You would be eaten by a wild animal. And we still react as though that is true. But I love Brene Brown's concept of the square squad. Make a 1-inch square piece of paper, write the names of the people whose opinion matters to you. And if people that are your haters or are criticizing you or are telling you what to do aren't on that square squad piece of paper, ignore them.
Yes. Good reminder. I forgot about the square. Yes, it's, and the one thing that I also observe is that when people are so worried about what others will think or how they'll be, received, they're saying everybody. It's usually 1 to 3 people.
Right.
There's 1, 2, or 3 people in their life that they're most worried about. And if you can really consciously get your head around that and say, you know what, to hell with it, I'm still gonna go for it. and let those people down or let them do whatever they want to do, that's where the liberation happens.
Yeah. Do we have time for one more quick story?
Yeah, absolutely. I could sit here all day and listen to your stories. I really could.
So when I was growing up, I loved to play the piano, and I decided that I was going to enroll in music school and become a jazz pianist. So I had studied and I applied to the University of North Texas and got accepted into their music school. And I remember telling my dad, I'm going to go be a jazz piano player. And my father exploded. I mean, exploded. And we had a contentious relationship. We just did. I was the problem child.
Black sheep,
Because again,
maybe? Black
yeah,
sheep?
push the envelope constantly.
Yeah.
And so my response to him was, well, if you're not going to let me study music, I won't go to college. Well, then I had him because it was like in my family, you had to go to college. And he's like, you can study music, but you will be, a business major or something else as well. So I go to North Texas. In my junior year, you have to do a recital. I discover I have horrific stage fright, not for public speaking, but for piano performance, where you are being graded on perfection in reproducing the notes as they are exactly written on a piece of music. And that came from years of hearing my father, when I would play something, literally swear and say, can't you play that right?
Mm.
So was why I ended up with a degree in journalism. In my junior year, I switched my major. It took me 5 years to get my undergrad degree. I was only like 20 credit hours short of master's at that. But anyway, so fast forward, I go through my life. My father and I have had periods where we didn't talk to each other for 5 years. Just like I said, acrimonious, contentious relationship. My sister dies of cancer. My brother dies of cancer. When my stepmother passes away, I'm the only child left for my father to go live with. And I'm kind of like, well, this is going to be interesting. And Chris and I had a very long discussion about, are we going to do this? And quite frankly, my father was in terrible health. And Chris's response was, he's only going to last about 6 months, Cass. Do you really care? And I was like, okay. Well, my father lived 3.5 years because we took such good care of him. But anyway, I had a baby grand piano downstairs in my home. My dad was living on the level above that, which was ground floor. And I went down and I was playing the piano. And I heard my dad get up and I heard his walker and I heard his caretaker going, where are you going, Bill? And he's like, I'm going to go listen. And I'm hearing my father getting closer and closer to the top of the stairs down to where the piano is. And I'm like freaking out because I'm just like, I know he's going to criticize me. And I finish playing and I hear my dad say, she plays so beautifully. Why did she ever stop? Then it gets better. He tells Greg, his caretaker, that he had wanted to be a jazz musician, but his father was dean of the engineering school at mechanical engineering school at the University of Illinois. And when my dad went off to serve in World War II, his father sold all of his musical instruments. And when my dad came back, he was told, I don't care what kind of an engineer you are, but you will be an engineer. I had never heard that story. So I did not understand why, when I said to my dad, I'm going to go be a jazz piano major, he went ballistic. I was living his dream.
Yeah.
And so, again, if we don't take those chances, if we don't make the choice to advocate for ourselves, for our dreams, it doesn't matter what other people think, because in coaching work I did a bazillion years ago, I looked at the model of change. We all know William Bridges' model, but there's a formula. You make a change and it makes people around you uncomfortable. and they go change back. And you keep moving forward and they go change back and it gets more intense. And then it keeps on escalating to change back now or else. That's your destiny moment. Because if you choose to hold fast to what you are doing, the system will reorganize itself around your new behavior.
Mhm.
If you acquiesce, you don't go back to where you started. You go back further than that because you have just taught whoever that is, they can bully you into giving up your dream.
Mm. Incredible. That's the life lesson right now, right there.
Yeah.
It's like we would recede even further. We would just drop down
Correct.
further. So even
Correct.
further away from our
Correct.
dream, our goal.
Right.
If we go for it and then there is that moment and I know that moment, we can feel it sometimes. Where it's like,
It's
this is the
palpable. Yeah.
shift.
Yes.
This is make or break your moment. This is going to change things.
Yes. And you have to believe enough in yourself, in the worthiness of your desire. And again, we all know desire comes from the Latin root of the Father.
Mhm.
These are spiritual gifts to us. When we have something that we really want, that's spirit talking to us.
Yeah.
As long as it's not illegal or immoral.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
There is that caveat, because I've heard, oh, I'm supposed to be in love with this married person. Yeah, no, you're not.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Thank you for
But
the asterisks there.
yes, exactly. But again, it always comes back to choice.
Hmm.
And what's interesting is I would rather be lonely on my journey to doing what I do, knowing that in the future, people who share my vision and dream will find me, than I would be. I mean, if you're looking back, if like all the people that you're hanging with are talking about what has been
Mhm.
rather than where you're going, get yourself new friends. Because life
Yes.
is not back there, it's now and moving forward.
I think you have to be harsh about that with the friend and the circle thing. I
Correct.
really do. It's like if they're just not wanting to grow or support you or just like be in that space of expansion. For me, that's like they don't have to have big dreams or anything like that, but
No.
just the shifting, the moving, the growth mindset and things like that.
Yep.
I'm so glad you did share that story too, because I know for me, I've had to learn this with the generational trauma that passes on, or forgetting that our parents are bringing their trauma to the table. They pass it down to us, or they express it in maybe not the best ways, and we don't know the story that they
No.
had. Like we
No.
so don't know. I know some people are very close to their parents, and they maybe know a lot. I actually know very little about like my dad's childhood, and I've heard snippets, and I've had to really reflect on a lot of stuff that he said throughout his life that was maybe not kind or helpful. I was like, well, there's stories there that I don't know about.
Yeah.
And
Very wise on your part to discern that.
yeah, not until I was a little bit older, especially with my mom too. We had more the I can't say the word today, but we had,
Acrimonious.
yes, thank you.
Yes.
That kind of relationship. But you have to not listen to your parents sometimes. I mean, that really is part of it
Right.
as well.
Yeah. Don't let their limit
Yes.
limit you.
That's a better way to say it. Yes, thank you. That's a kinder way to say it, Kathryn. Thank you for that. So what would you say is just one of the biggest lessons or the biggest changes in perspectives that you've had since your husband passed away tragically?
That the quality of life I will have is entirely up to me. And that to find a passion and purpose that makes me happy to get out of bed every morning, and that I know does not just benefit me, but benefits my friends, my family, my community, my city, my state, my country, the world. Problems are universal, but so are solutions. And it all starts right here with you. And taking the time, again, we are so distracted in our digital age. That's one of the reasons I live at the top of a mountain, and I literally live at the top of a mountain.
I am so jealous. I say to my husband all the time, are we going to live on the mountaintop now? Or like, is this the time? Is this the moment? Are we going to the mountaintop?
Yeah, that I have space up here to listen,
Yeah.
to be quiet. You can't hear if you're constantly distracted by your phone, your computer, your podcast, your gaming system, whatever it is. To me, nature is a healer and the wisest instructor we can connect with. And so every day I take time to be outdoors. Every day I take time to check in with myself. And when I get ungrounded, I can just like spin and spin and spin. It's like, where's your head? Where's your heart? What's running you in this moment?
Mm.
Is it your ego? Is it your fear? And it's like, then calm yourself down. I'm a huge believer in brain spotting. I have brain spotting music that, like, the first time I did it, I thought I was on an acid trip, and I've never done drugs.
I haven't heard brain spotting in a while. That's I remember learning about that a long time ago. Interesting.
Yeah. But I literally saw colors and things like that.
Yeah.
Now I can listen to it and I come back into my body.
Yeah.
If I'm not in my body, I'm not making good decisions. And the other thing I would say, we are so sleep deprived and addicted to overwork. I'm guilty of it. My friends are like, Kathryn, you never shut down. But so much of it is, I love what I'm doing.
Yes.
If it was stuff I hated, then I might feel differently. But truly, I don't feel deprived because I work a lot. But I am bound and determined, Alana, that before I die, there will be a Restoration Ranch, USA, global, whatever facility in the United States, in every state in the United States. And I want this movement to go international. Because if we don't take care of our first responders, we're already seeing what happens. It's harder and harder to recruit. And the people that they are recruiting are folks that they would have rejected 10 years ago.
Yes.
And we need to be aware, if we don't help the helpers, there will be no one to help us.
No.
And you said it so beautifully. They are angels in human form. I'm going to close by saying it took the guy on the other end of the phone that when I called and I got connected to the police department, it took him a year to tell me he was with my husband when he died and had tried to save his life.
Mm.
He is an angel.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I do want to ask you just one more question before we finish today. And that is when I ask everyone, and that is in the spirit of helping people ditch the struggle. What do you feel is most important to commit to?
Keeping promises to yourself. When you keep promises to yourself, we find it so easy to keep promises to other people because we don't want to let them down. But when we let ourselves down, we are reinforcing that we are not worthy or that we shouldn't have, or that, all the negative stuff. Keeping your promise to yourself is something that's a skill, and you practice with little things. I think that, again, I taught piano for a number of years, and I would tell my piano students, you only have to practice for 15 minutes a day. And the parents would go, what? They need to practice for hours. No, they need to practice for 15 minutes a day. But there was a method to my madness. If they could sit and practice for 15 minutes, more than likely, they would get into what they were doing. and they would practice much longer. And if in 15 minutes they weren't into it, their time was better served doing something else rather than forcing it. So again, keep your promises to yourself and give yourself the grace and space you would give to someone else, because we rarely do that.
No, we don't. And no one has ever said that about keeping the promises to yourself. So I do love that answer. And I know it's going to help out a lot of people too. I think we just need that reminder. Put ourselves first. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So where can people find more about you and learn about the Restoration Ranch, Colorado? All the things you're doing.
Thank you. So we have a website, restorationranchcolorado.com. Like all nonprofits, our funding is a constant struggle. We are doing some unique and innovative things. And one of the reasons I'm so busy is I am starting not one, not two, but 3 for-profit businesses to fund the nonprofit. So one of the things
Just 4?
that I do...
Not 5?
Yeah, I mean, my board of trustees, they're like, you're a wild woman. And I'm like, yeah, just, okay, just trust me.
Yeah.
But restorationranchcolorado.com is our website, and there's a contact us and contact me form on there. I also am a retirement readiness expert. That was what I was doing when Chris was killed. And I have a book called Your Countdown to Retirement. I have now adapted that for law enforcement and for the first responder community. Your Countdown to Retirement for law enforcement is currently out. And Your Countdown to Retirement for fire and EMS is in the works, and we'll just keep on working through all those different groups. And that is yourcountdowntoretirement.com. But the thing that I am most passionate about, I mean, there's lots of things I'm passionate about, but I love my podcast, which is Are You Relentlessly Resilient on Spotify? And it's only 5 minutes long, but it's 5 minutes of magic, where it's just like we talk about one idea and everybody can listen to something for 5 minutes.
Yes.
And I just have so much fun with it.
Well, first of all, that sounds like a platform perfect for you with all your storytelling and your wisdom. The 5-minute idea is amazing because anyone can squish in 5 minutes. I'm a big believer in 5-minute this, 10-minute meditations. 10 minutes seems to be working real well for me these days in terms of time for meditation. And just squishing in it and doing something every day to kind of help yourself along.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to put all the links below in the show notes. So please, everyone, check that out and support this mission. And I'm going to do whatever I can to help your mission and your wisdom reach the world.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it has been an absolute delight to be your guest today. I so appreciate the opportunity to talk with you because you are just a rock star.
Thank you so much. Well, we're just here trying to, support one another. And these stories have to come out. It's all about the storytelling. Thank you so much, Kathryn.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for joining me today on Ditch the Struggle. You showing up here means so, so much to me. To dig deeper into the topics discussed today and to learn about my work, visit alanarosa.com. And don't forget to download your free resources while you're there. And if this episode resonated with you, please share with others who also want to ditch the struggle. Go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, leave a rating and a review, and let me know what you'd like to see more of on this podcast. And before I go, I want to leave you with my 3 favorite ways to ditch the struggle. Be your own best advocate, take baby steps for the win, and forget about a linear career path. It's overrated and you are doing just fine. See you next time.